Hello and welcome. We finally got started. Appreciate the patience and the great work from the technical team here. So welcome to the LNS Research LinkedIn Live Unified Performance Excellence broadcast. This research we'll be showing today is based on over a year's worth of work from Jim Wells. We have not yet shared it public. So this is the first time we're sharing this new research. We've shared it with a number of clients, but this is the first time it's out and live to the broader audience. So we will be talking about how to integrate continuous improvement, workforce, and digital programs, and breaking down those silos to drive step change improvement. Here's your two great speakers today. Myself, Matt Littlefield, President, Co-founder, and Research Lead, and Jim Wells, our Research Analyst and author of the study. So before we get started, you will receive all these slides via email after the session. During the presentation, we do have view of the chat box. So please chat with us, share your comments. We'll address them as we go, as much as we can. We will also save time for Q&A at the end. We will do a post-event survey, so please share with us how we've done. For those of you who don't know who LNS Research is or may not be intimately connected with us, we are a research and advisory firm on a mission to empower industry leaders to transform their organization. And our vision is a world where industrial companies are autonomous, sustainable, and agile. So let's jump in. I'm going to set the stage a little bit before we get to Jim's great research here. So today's research really is focused on those COOs, those VPs of global operations, those performance excellence leaders across global industrials. And you are being hit from every angle with a whole set of multiple challenges and business objectives. And balancing these on an ongoing basis is the purpose of your job and what you're challenged with. So it's balancing the product and process innovation, operational efficiency, ensuring customer experience, meeting those sustainability and EHS goals, and ensuring we have sustainable and agile supply chains. The big piece that we want to talk about here today is the LNS Research Industrial Productivity Index. And this is a piece of research that highlights the need for unified performance excellence. So this is an index based on 166 publicly traded companies. It represents over $3.8 trillion of delivered product. It is based on inflation-adjusted both input and output prices. So this shows how effective manufacturers are today in terms of converting those raw materials into products for their customers. And this has been on a long-term trend up and to the right until we hit that global pandemic. And since then, we have been down and to the right. Each year of the past 3 years, we have been less productive than the year before. And this is why we need to redouble our efforts towards unified performance excellence. And it's significant. If you go back a couple of years, it was almost 9% decrease over the last 2 years. Prior to that, we were on that 1, 2, 3, 4% increase every year. So why is that happening? Why, from 2020, have we seen this decrease in productivity across manufacturing? So there's several reasons. The first one, and this is really top of mind for many manufacturing leaders, is the changes we see in the workforce. We call this the great goodbye. So 76% of manufacturers that we've surveyed have seen significant workforce challenges across their business, and it is impacting their ability to deliver. So what do those changes look like? If you look at a typical manufacturer's workforce, back in 2019, before the global pandemic, average tenure, 20 years, time in position could have been 7 years, 3-month retention rate, that was up around 90%. People were happy to get these jobs, right? They were excited to get the job at the mill. Today, that is not necessarily true. That tenure has plummeted, that time in position has plummeted, and the ability to retain new talent has come under significant pressure. And so what do we have to do about that? We have to realize that, hey, that highly experienced workforce that has largely left is not coming back. We have to figure out how to address those challenges and deliver that same level of productivity that we've become accustomed to with a less experienced workforce. And that requires new approaches to leadership strategy and culture. And how do you know if you have this problem within your business? Typically, the first challenge you'll see is safety, next comes quality, and then finally productivity. So this has been a long-term challenge that has been simmering and burning underneath the surface and is really impacting manufacturing today. What else are we seeing in terms of challenges? One big one is the global supply chain pressures. This is an index put out by the Fed, and you can see how volatility has increased over time. And we're pretty much balanced right now, right? We've gone through a couple of big upswings and downswings, chip shortages, other challenges. We're about even right now. We're right about equilibrium. But does anybody expect that to stay? No, right? We have to assume going forward that we're going to continue to have disruptions. The frequency and intensity of those disruptions are likely going to be increasing. And so we have to be investing in an agile and resilient supply chain. And then the final point I want to make is manufacturing is a mature, long-term planning type industry. Our assets are long-lived, our product life cycles are long-lived, but often in operations, our planning horizon and the tenure of leadership is short. A lot of times, heads of manufacturing, they almost have the mindset at the end of each year, they're excited to be in business again. They're excited to have another year. It's not like they're planning out 3, 5, 10 years in advance. And so this strategic planning horizon is another aspect that really does have to change in manufacturing. So a lot of manufacturers that have adopted the mindset of smart manufacturing industry 4.0. And so we've been tracking this since 2015, and many industrial companies have these technology initiatives in place. It's now over half of companies have some type of transformation initiative in place around technology and manufacturing. Another third are planning to adopt an initiative like this. The naysayers now are all the way down to 12%. So there is a broad set of manufacturers out there that are adopting technology. And they've done this over the last 3 years as productivity has tailed off. So I think the clear result from this is you have to say to yourself, investing in technology is not going to be enough to address all of those challenges that we just talked about, right? The workforce, the supply chain disruption, and the lack of long-term strategic planning in manufacturing. So how do we address this? We think first and foremost, it starts with leadership strategy and culture at the highest level within the organization. We believe companies need to adopt some type of Operation 2030 strategy. What is the future vision of this organization going to look like over the next 6 years and more? You have to name and brand that initiative. You have to set and refresh those objectives. We talked about the journey to zero plus and the power of zero. You can't get to zero incrementally. You have to change the way you operate. So that's zero harm, zero waste, zero net carbon, plus step change productivity growth. You have to have your strategic initiatives spanning people, process, and technology across a broad set of operational areas. So we talked about quality, the workforce, autonomous plant, embedded EHS, and right there in the middle is today's topic, unified performance excellence. And that all has to be built on a foundation of architecture and analytics, knowledge management, change management, and value chain integration.
So Matt, I'd like to, if you don't mind, I'd like to weigh in on one of the things you talked about here. So we had some interesting research findings around branding of the initiative. We divide our research into leaders and followers, and in the Unified Performance Excellence research, leaders were about 18% of the total population. However, when we looked at those that had branded their initiative, the number of leaders increased to almost 50%. So there is some value to branding and embedding these initiatives into the culture of the company.
Yeah, I think you got to take ownership of it. You've got to make it something that not just you as a leader believe in, but that everyone in the organization can put a stake in. So what makes a strategy like this successful? We believe it has to be end-to-end in terms of that operating model, which is core to what we're talking about today, which is unified performance excellence. You do need a clear understanding of your specific burning platform. It could be workforce, it could be supply chain disruptions, it could be something else, but you have to clearly understand why you're doing this. And it's not just to get that next 10%. It's why do you have to do this to preserve what you have today? And that's that balance of value preservation versus value creation. And initiatives like this really have to do both. And then why do strategies like this fail? We see a couple different failure modes. One is that there is no senior executive with this strategic vision and that has the change management and operational credibility to go across these pillars. So each of these pillars may have leaders, but does the head of operations, have they nominated somebody to look across this and drive this strategy? Often the answer is no, and we're going to talk about how maybe those performance excellence leaders could be that person. You also have to acknowledge that transformation, which has been a buzzword for a number of years, is not just about technology. In fact, technology is probably the smallest part of what transformation is, and that's why we talk about industrial transformation, not digital transformation here at LNS. You do need to have a robust governance and change management process around this overarching strategy as well as the pillars. Lots of companies will work with a consultant or develop them themselves and build a grand strategy and vision, and then it gets put in the drawer and you look at it once a year. That is not going to drive change. And then finally, failing to scale is a big challenge across manufacturing today. Why are companies failing to scale? We say they fail to scale because they fail to prove. And I know Jim's going to dive into that later. Yep. So with that, I'd love to pass the baton to Jim and have him share with you all the great research he's done over the past year on this topic.
Thanks, Matt. I'm excited to be here with everyone here on the LinkedIn Live today to share this new research on unified performance excellence. We're going to talk about 3 big ideas to supercharge your improvement engine. So traditional continuous improvement management systems have evolved from shop floor focused Lean and Six Sigma initiatives to more comprehensive holistic approaches that encompass the customer and supplier. Those are typified by operational excellence, total quality management, and world-class manufacturing. However, all of these initiatives share one common trait, and that is they reach a point of diminishing returns or slowing returns. These policy and procedure-based programs have typically reached the tipping point, in some cases as soon as during the initial training. There's a variety of reasons for this, including long training cycles, uncertain project results, long wait times for accomplishment, and all of these lead to lack of management confidence and switching of programs off and on. In our research on unified performance excellence, we saw that 75% of manufacturers report losing momentum after their initial efforts to establish a performance excellence program. These performance excellence programs are a large investment, and global heads of operations cannot afford to let that investment go to waste or to fail. And so we envision a framework for unified performance excellence that embeds the digital process improvement engine into the operational architecture, focused on embedding the knowledge and touching the work process across the value stream from new product introduction and supplier performance all the way through to manufacturing and delivery and any post-delivery services that may be applicable, overlaid with an intelligent risk management approach that brings together business integration and analytic sophistication to achieve a self-learning, prognostic, embedded approach to identify and surface risks sooner. As Matt said in his talk a minute ago, risks are, we're not done with the 100-year storms that have affected manufacturers in the last 5 years. We just may not know what the next thing is. And so having a structured approach that takes advantage of industrial transformation technology and practices to transform traditional continuous improvement management systems from policy and procedure driven manual activity to an embedded, digitally embedded holistic approach is essential in order to help us get ahead and stay ahead of the next risk that might affect our operation. As Matt said, we see that there is a need for a strategy leader that supports that vice president of global operations or COO, and we do believe that unified performance excellence executives are uniquely positioned to be able to elevate into this strategy owner role. There are several skill sets that they have that lend them to this role around a strengthened, structured approach. Continuous improvement is all about a structured methodology to solve problems. Of course, they have a strength in database decision making that supports those structured approaches. They typically come, UPX executives typically come from domain expertise in a manufacturing support function. The most typical is the quality function, but they can also come from plant engineering support or EHS support as well. And so they have some level of understanding of how manufacturing operations work. And of course, any improvement program, performance excellence program is a change management activity. So there is some inherent knowledge resident within these UPX executives of how to move workers from old ways of work to new ways of work associated with the change that is coming their way. However, UPX executives have some critical experience gaps that need to be closed in order for them to really effectively step up into this strategy leader role. They need to become familiar with how manufacturing operations business objectives and strategies are set. Oftentimes, unified performance excellence leaders are executing on initiatives that are the result of business objectives, but may not be closely tied to how those objectives are derived and how the strategies fit together into a comprehensive, holistic business strategy. And of course, coming from domain experience in a manufacturing support function is great. However, to really be an effective strategy leader, these individuals need to have a comprehensive understanding of how manufacturing operations works at the company that they're trying to develop strategy for.
Hey Jim, we have one question from the audience here from Paul Boris on this idea of the role of a strategy leader for manufacturing. His question, and we already let him know that we have some data forthcoming in one of our other studies, is that planning horizon, like how long do we see most manufacturers building that strategy planning horizon, and do we see any differences by small and medium versus large enterprises? I know you were a VP of quality for a small and medium-sized enterprise before. So
yeah, from my experience, thanks Paul, by the way, for that question. From my experience, a 3-year planning horizon was typical. I do believe that planning horizon is getting shorter as manufacturing is more dynamic and becoming affected by unplanned events that are coming at them very rapidly. So maybe there's a short term, a medium term, and a long term planning horizon. But I believe that it's much more difficult today to plan out 5 years accurately. Mm-hmm. And I've seen is a 3-year plan that's refreshed every year. That's a rolling plan into the future is the approach that makes the most sense.
I think that's an ideal case. I think in a lot of the companies that we work with, there is a overarching value chain or supply chain strategy, probably end to end from procurement to distribution. But the manufacturing, the make piece, often doesn't even build a strategic plan.
Right.
That part of the value chain is execution focused. They stay execution focused, and they just key off of whatever broader strategies being built. Right. And they haven't taken the time or discipline to build their own strategy. They have more of a cost center mentality, which impacts business case and proving that scale, which we'll talk about later. And they almost have this mindset. We were talking with a large industrial just a couple of weeks ago. Almost surprised at the end of the year that they get to do it again. That they survived and they're ready to do it again.
Right. And
so that shift from delivery and execution to strategic planning is a big one for a lot of folks.
It's certainly unfamiliar territory. I think that in manufacturing, there's an underlying assumption that The way I'm going to operate next year is the same as the way I operate this year, and not much will change. And I think the lesson that we've learned over the last 5 years of the several hundred-year storms that we've endured in manufacturing is that we can no longer safely make that assumption.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to share three big ideas from the Unified Performance Excellence research with you guys here today. And hopefully the takeaway you get from these is to help you build your strategy for Unified Performance Excellence as the strategy engine for your manufacturing operations. The first big idea that I'd like to share is we call start small and aim high. And this is really just a reflection that we can't eat the apple all in one bite. We can't transform in a year. Oftentimes, industrial transformation is a 5-year or more journey. We've seen from several areas of our research that industrial transformation leaders view these activities as a long-term, sometimes never-ending journey. And similar with Unified Performance Excellence, you have to start by finding a sponsor. Maybe it's a P&L leader in the business that believes in your vision for building this improvement engine with an overlay of intelligent risk management, and gives you the air cover that you need in order to architect those approaches and tools onto existing platforms. Of course, test and refine the approach by working on goals and objectives of that sponsor, that P&L leader. And of course, nothing breeds success like success, so you have to earn your license to scale by achieving business results for that P&L leader. And so we say failure to prove revokes your license to scale. And the interesting thing here is this becomes counterintuitive, is once you have the approach refined and is functional, this gives the other parts of the organization that may lag behind on the maturity curve in terms of adoption of a culture of excellence, the opportunity to leapfrog and take these digital approaches and start building their own results.
Yep.
And so the pull gets created by having results that are demonstrated to the business. In fact, from our research, we saw that only 24% of organizations have an enterprise-wide deployment of traditional performance excellence approaches before they start to digitize and apply unified performance excellence concepts.
Paul asked a follow-up question on the idea of momentum. And a few slides ago, we had 75% of folks have lost momentum. He wants to know if folks ever had momentum and what that looked like. Maybe talk a little bit about those traditional approaches and how they lost momentum.
It's difficult. Traditional continuous improvement approaches have several hurdles that have to be overcome in order to achieve a sustained momentum. There are long training cycles. I can tell you from my experience as a master black belt, it took me a couple of years before, to get through the training, and then before I felt like an expert, I had to practice a number of times on specific projects until I finally felt like I had achieved that expertise. There's high project failure rate. It's not uncommon to have 50% or more of projects that fail initially. And then, of course, there are long wait times for results. So, heads of global operations have to have a lot of patience. And sometimes, and as particularly in this fast-paced, rapidly changing manufacturing environment of today, they don't really have the luxury of time to wait for those results. As you pointed out, Matt, in your slide, COO or VP of operations tenure is short, sometimes a year or two, and that time can be taken up by waiting for results.
Yep.
And so there are several headwinds to traditional approaches that can be improved by embedding the approach in the operational architecture.
Yeah, I think that's right. We've seen a lot of different approaches, but a lot of times, that world-class manufacturing or TPM or TQM initiative started 10, 15, 20 years ago. It was the most important initiative and vision of that global head of operations. But it probably didn't start as a global program. Lots of times it started within maybe one division or within one plant if it was a larger enterprise, and then proved the value and then created that pull, went from push to pull. So don't underestimate that way that it built originally, and hey, you have to recreate that same approach now. Don't think it's going to all happen at once. And then it is very people dependent.
Yes.
It's very paper dependent in the traditional mode. And so as leaders left, as things turned over, as new priorities came along, that's when the momentum leaves. And that's hopefully what we're going to fix with digitizing some of these pieces.
Yeah, I talk about traditional continuous improvement management systems as held together by human glue. And then the other, and so if people don't have the expertise and the discipline to follow the process, to enforce process discipline on others, then it can rapidly deteriorate. And the other thing is that the organizations can achieve a level of maturity, but in a traditional continuous improvement management system that's based on policies and procedures, oftentimes that backslides when organizational leaders change and the focus changes. And so that is an endemic characteristic of these approaches as well. So we envision the progress on start small and aim high to advance from a tools first approach to then process in the operational architecture, and then finally to embed the process execution within the operational architecture. You have to connect data sources that are relevant to the process that you're trying to improve upon. And so we see a significant uptick in the digitization of performance excellence tools, about 60% increase in the digitization of those tools in the last 3 years. If you look at the chart, you'll notice that the theme of those tools is primarily lean manufacturing focused, which aligns with the preferred process on the right, being an early preference for lean manufacturing. And so this reflects the idea that manufacturing shop floor is ground zero for identification of improvement opportunities, but that the changing preference for process changes over time as a reflection that when all you have is a hammer in your toolbox, every problem looks like a nail. Mm-hmm. And so we need to expand beyond the shop floor to across the value chain, and then add processes that include things like asset performance and talent management and those sorts of things as a more comprehensive performance excellence approach. And this is also reflected in the digital data start point is product and process quality, and then expands across the value chain, and then into sustainability, EHS, and APM, tool sets from there. So the next big idea that I'd like to talk about is build on what you have, scale with what you need. And this is where we build the improvement engine that's connected to the value chain process from new product development all the way through post-delivery service by leveraging in-house performance excellence experts to build unified performance excellence onto existing flexible applications. So we saw in the research that 34% build unified performance excellence onto an enterprise quality management software platform. This makes some sense. I mentioned earlier that unified performance excellence leaders tend to come from manufacturing support functions, most typically quality. And so an enterprise quality management software is familiar territory and is kind of like home base for those quality experts. However, the three important variables or features that any platform for unified performance excellence needs is robust digital data connectivity, a capability for advanced industrial analytics to apply that prognostic level of analytic capability, and then finally, finally, a flexible platform to allow those performance excellence experts to build their unique custom processes onto the platform. And it reflects on the branding discussion that we had earlier, that in order to achieve that embedded brand, it has to have the look and feel of the process that's unique to the company.
Yep. Maybe one thought on that last slide there, maybe you can comment on it, is not all enterprise quality management software providers are created equal.
That's correct.
Some have those capabilities that you talked about.
Right.
Some are still more paper on glass,
Developing, right.
like you like to push on.
Sure. Yeah, it's not a universal. That's a good point. Thank you for that, Matt. Not all EQMSs are created equal. Some are still very document and event-driven platforms that have limited capabilities for data connectivity and are really more at the business intelligence level of analytic capability. So, but there are, as you said, there are a few that are going data forward as their strategy and could become good candidate platforms for unified performance excellence as well as core enterprise quality management functions.
You may get to this later, but are there other types of applications out there that may also be a good platform for digitizing performance excellence?
Yeah, I don't have a slide in here on it, but we've we've just recently refreshed our reference architecture, IX reference architecture, and the capabilities that are represented by what we call an industrial applications platform are really the core requirements that I mentioned. The data connectivity, the advanced analytics, and the flexible composable platform to build apps on is really at that industrial applications platform layer within the architecture.
And I think some of the connected frontline workforce application providers too are focused on this space, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So there's a lot of overlap, and the boundaries between different layers of the architecture is not clean, and so there's a lot of overlapping capabilities. As you mentioned, some connected frontline worker applications are moving into this kind of space. Others, analytics platforms are developing these capabilities as well. So it's very fluid at the moment.
Great.
So what we've seen, to the last point about flexible and composable architecture to allow performance excellence experts to build on, that was an insight that we saw from the research, is that 67% of respondents to the Unified Performance Excellence Survey were investing their internal in-house expertise in order to build those custom apps on whatever their chosen platform was. Now, of course, these are not software coders, right? These are not people who write code for a living, and so they're citizen developers, right? And so having that flexible, composable platform to allow citizen developers to write their own tools and write their own apps is essential. And in this case, we've seen in the last year, with the rapid adoption of generative AI approaches into industrial applications, that the generative AI has the potential to change the game in terms of writing custom apps and to make it even easier for citizen developers to write their own.
Mm-hmm. And also just in some of the day-to-day conversations and a lot of the informal knowledge that it's like just think of stand-up meetings or shift handovers.
Right.
Like how much of that intelligence actually gets captured and becomes institutional knowledge?
Right. It's interesting because we've heard from some analytics vendors that are incorporating generative AI into an operator assistant model where they're using generative AI to to deliver insights from written documents and recordings of spoken language and those sorts of things. So the opportunities for generative AI to change the game are significant. The third area of big ideas that I want to talk about is extending intelligent risk management into unified performance excellence and building it onto the operational architecture. The goal here is to achieve a self-learning, prognostic, embedded intelligent risk management approach that helps you get ahead of risks before they impact your operation. So the concept here is we want to build out our unique risk frameworks within many manufacturing organizations, most if not all. There are pockets of risk thinking that already exist within the organization. So EH&S professionals have long been leaders in risk thinking in terms of how to manage risks associated with safety, personal injury, and those sorts of things. So they are leaders in risk thinking in most organizations. Of course, with the deployment of Sarbanes-Oxley requirements several years ago, and then recently sustainability reporting, finance parts of organizations as well as EHS are starting to think in terms of risk now. Quality has long thought in terms of product and process quality risk. Pardon me. And engineering organizations, those organizations that are responsible for product development, are recent newcomers to risk thinking in terms of how their product will be used in the market and how the process to produce that product could go wrong. And so take advantage of these pockets of risk thinking in order to begin to standardize the risk framework for your organization. I talk about risk as every organization is a snowflake when it comes to risk, because even two competitor organizations in the same space, they have different operating modalities and different tolerance for risk. And so therefore their risk frameworks will be unique to them. And so this is an individual company activity that needs to be done based on the risk profiles and the tolerance for risk of each individual company. Of course, there are several frameworks out there. There's OSHA risk frameworks for safety. There's FMEA, failure modes and effects analysis, which quality and engineering folks are familiar with. And then there's risk frameworks that finance is familiar with as well. So there's not one consistent holistic framework that is an off the shelf that you can go pull and say, okay, we're going to populate our bullets into this. It is really an individual company effort in order to establish that risk framework and then standardize it into the operational architecture. Of course, because it's a unique snowflake type activity, flexible, composable platform is important here as well, because it's not an off-the-shelf type of activity. And then, of course, to embed it, to achieve an embedded approach, you have to connect data sources that support the elements of the risk framework.
I think this is an important learning that the discrete manufacturing industries can take from the process industries.
Yeah.
You know, within discrete manufacturing, when you think about performance excellence, it's often material flow and waste reduction and focus on the customer.
Right.
Whereas when you look at the process industries and how operational excellence evolved from DuPont and Dow and others, there was always a big focus on risk.
Right.
And so a lot of times, automotive, TPS or WCM or whatever, right? They don't necessarily look to other industries to see, hey, what else can I pull in? And
That's
I think
right.
this risk-based thinking is a big learning that others can gather.
I think the supply chain disruptions that we've lived with have hit discrete industries particularly hard, and have hopefully taught them a lesson that they need to be thinking about risk as well. It's a different kind of risk compared to process industries or oil and gas, but certainly risk is there and relevant to everyone. And we see in the research that leaders are 82% more likely to be building their embedded risk frameworks to monitor risk in real time. And this is accomplished by building that risk framework that I talked about on the previous slide, connecting it to real-time live data sources that are relevant to those framework elements. And then unified performance excellence leaders are 85% more likely to be employing artificial intelligence or machine learning at the risk level to help supervise changing risks. And this is a key development in the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning, in that, as the risk environment has become more complex, as the global manufacturing environment has become more complex, having a people managed risk profile becomes more risky in and of itself, because a person might miss a changing level of threat from the real-time data, and then that risk is realized and hits the organization and in the worst case shuts manufacturing down. So this is an exciting development in artificial intelligence to help supervise changing risks at the intelligent risk management layer as well. And so in this area of research, same as in most of our other research practices, we have developed a unified performance excellence maturity model and a benchmark sprint that member organizations can take advantage of in order to assess their capability adoption across 5 levels of maturity, from ad hoc all the way up through embedded approaches. This approach helps organizations identify areas of strength and weakness across the 9 elements in the 3 areas of people, process, and technology. And the really valuable part about these benchmark sprints is that they help organizations build and refine business cases and really develop the roadmap for unified performance excellence practice within their organizations. So I'd like to leave some time for questions, but I'd like to leave you with a few recommendations here. So first is build towards a real-time risk view through the lens of operational agility, flexibility, and resiliency. This is to help drive the intelligent risk management as the strategy engine for manufacturing operations. Embed the execution process to standardize and lower the special knowledge requirement associated with traditional approaches to really get out of being held hostage by that expert. And then, of course, once you've achieved the embedded, digitally enabled approach, leverage artificial intelligence and advanced industrial analytics at the risk layer to aid in surfacing of risks and opportunities at the top level to develop strategies to ideally prevent those issues from occurring in the future. And then, of course, by that embedded approach, you can also take advantage of advanced digital tools such as digital twins, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and advanced industrial analytics to help speed execution. So add intelligence to the execution engine in order to help speed time to results. Just like to, before we hand it off for questions, I'd just like to mention that I have written 2 research reports that are available soon in the research library on this. There's a transformation ebook that touches on these and several other areas of unified performance excellence, and then a blueprint for how to build unified performance excellence into your approach. So with that, I think we're ready for questions.
All right, great. Well, thank you for that. I think it was pretty interactive as we went, but there were a few questions here that we can touch on. One is on a point that was made in some of our future industrial work research, and that is evolving the employee experience. And part of that is finding new paths to leadership. And so one question was, how do you uncover or engage with frontline employees to potentially have them become those next leaders in performance excellence?
You know, that's a great question, and one of the aspects of the holistic, digitally embedded approach is that it democratizes performance excellence. So it through connected frontline worker apps or an enterprise quality management software that's deployed to a shop floor, really gives the frontline worker the opportunity to engage in improving their own work. And then as they build those skills and become more confident, that opens up development opportunities for them to move into that as a skill set space or into larger leadership roles. So I think it's a key enabler.
Great. Another question for you, Jim. When you look at your overarching unified performance excellence framework, there's three different aspects to it. One is doing the work, one is improving the work, and one is transforming the work. Can you comment on if those are different individuals, the same individual at different times? How best to think about that? Is there a better way to do it, one versus the other?
Yeah, I think that there's overlap in the personas that are involved in each of those three areas. I think that in traditional continuous improvement approaches, oftentimes teams are deployed as a SWAT team, so to speak, to parachute into an operation and improve it, and then leave a book for those that are doing the process in order to help them do the process the new way. Oftentimes that fails. And one of the characteristic difficulties of traditional approaches is engagement of the workforce in the effort, and there's a lot of difficulties with taking people out of their roles. It affects productivity in the manufacturing organization. Oftentimes you want the best people involved in these improvement projects, and that hurts more when you pull a strong performer out of their role in order to execute on an improvement project. And so it's painful to do that in traditional approaches. I think the holistic, digitally embedded approach, as I mentioned earlier, democratizes these and allows people who are doing the work access to the tools and the process without having to spend the significant months in order to develop the expertise, in order to then be involved in improving their own work processes as well. And of course, that is the do the work and then improve the work. There has to be some expert guidance around improving the work until the digitally embedded approach is achieved. But then transforming the work is really the role of that strategy leader that we talked about, right? It's as risks are surfaced through intelligent risk management, there's really two groups of activities: those that mitigate the risk, which are the improvement teams could do those, but prevent the risk from being realized is more of a strategic kind of thing, and that's the transform the work, right? So I'm going to understand what my significant risks are that I most am interested in preventing, and then develop transformation strategies around that in order to help work me out of being subjected to those risks.
Great. Well, that was a wonderful presentation, Jim. We'll end it there. I'd like to end with this idea for all of those in attendance right now. Here in Boston, we will be having our industrial transformation event in October, 20th to the 30th in 2024 this year. We will be covering this topic. We'll have multiple roundtables on it. So if you had and enjoyed this conversation, we will be continuing it and diving it deeper in person in a little over 6 months. So we hope to see you there. And with that, thank you for joining us today, and we hope you join us in our next LinkedIn Live event. Thank you.
Thank you.